Chevron 1, loaded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the dogs of war.
Chevron 2 is loaded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
I'll also say that you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not for while you can, monkey boy.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass! I thought I'd die fighting side by side for now.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Howdy and hail. Welcome, everybody, back. Saturday Night Drive-In. We took a week off from MegaCon, but we're back. We're live. We're ready to sit down and have what I hope is going to be a very, very good discussion about a movie that I really enjoy every time I watch it. I'm happy to welcome back the Ginger Jesus himself, Jed the Hollywood Scholar. Jed, I really haven't seen you in a while.
I know we joke about that all the time, but it's actually true this time.
It's been true.
A couple weeks, and that's weird. That is very weird.
Yeah.
But it is great to be back, especially with a film of this quality. I'm very excited to talk about something.
I am so glad to hear you say that, because you guys got to know by now, every time I throw one of these out there and Jed hasn't seen it, it's a coin toss. Is he going to hate me, or is he going to love that?
Never hated you, man. I've never once hated you for a choice that I didn't like. Even The Golden Child, as rough as that was, it was never personal. But this one, you definitely won some brownie points with this film.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that tonight's movie, Memoirs of a Geisha, this is what we call cinema. This is just a movie. This is cinema, because it is art. From the cinematography to the epic soundtrack by one John Williams, to perfect casting, near perfect performances, the flow. I mean, everything about this movie. I said this to Jeb before we got started. I'm going to be honest. I have a hard time finding criticisms of this movie. I really do.
I agree wholeheartedly. This is one of the most recent films that I say embodies classic cinema more than any that I've seen in a long time. Like, this feels like a Gone with the Wind, a Casablanca, or something like that, where it's just magnificent for the time, for modern times, just all around. We're going to be talking about this movie for centuries, where I might love The Predator, I might love Alien, but I don't know if in 200 years we'll still be talking about those films. This is like, it feels like a classic film. The momentum, the pacing, this feels like something that, make it black and white, tell me it came out in the 40s or 50s, and I would believe you.
Yeah. Here's what's fascinating about this film. Usually we talk about things, at least from my perspective, it's a first act, second act, third act structure. No, we have an actual prologue in this movie. Young Chio's life, from when she gets sold and then tries to escape and then gets and meets the chairman. That's the prologue. The real movie starts in the 6-year time skip, when she's 15, 16, the story really begins. I mean, do you feel that way as I do on that?
Oh, it's definitely an extended prologue. I wouldn't call that period a first act necessarily. I could see people saying with how long it is, it could definitely qualify as a first act, but I feel fits better as being defined as a prologue.
Because it does. This is why I totally agree with you. This is now 2005. This movie's 20 years old now, dude. Or almost 20 years old. Sorry, almost 19.
Almost.
2024 already feels like 2025, but that's the world we live in right now. It doesn't feel like it's that old, but maybe because it's a period piece, and this is one of the things I love about period pieces, especially when they get the attention to detail right, from the scenery to the clothes to the hairstyles to the behavior.
It immerses you.
You're pulled right in. When you start this movie, there's no hint that this is a World War II period piece, except for one moment during the time skip when you hear we are now we are reflecting on and celebrating our ally, a certain mustachioed man in Germany's success. It's like, okay, well, this is taking place. It starts in the 20s, continues into the 30s, and ends in the mid 40s. And you don't realize it, and that's part of the message of the movie, which we will get into. But I love the prologue because it introduces everybody, just about everybody important. Only a couple of characters later on that aren't introduced until the second act. But it gets it. I mean,
Michelle Yeoh comes in very late.
Very late.
Overall.
And even when she gets introduced, it's a blip in the prologue. You see her at the top of the stairs. You don't even realize it's Michelle Yeoh at all.
Oh, I didn't even realize that was her. So I didn't know she was in the prologue at all. But I had no idea what I was getting into this film. All I knew is that, it took place somewhere around World War II. That is what I'd heard. I didn't even know what a geisha was before watching this film. I knew literally nothing. The funny thing is when I first started watching it, and it has that bit at the beginning at the
where you hear straight Japanese, you think you're gonna get subtitles.
Exactly, and no subtitles came up, so I started freaking out. I was like, "Am I gonna? Do I have a wrong copy? Is this just in Japanese?" Trying to check my settings, like, is there a subbed version? Oh, do I need to find a different copy on a different website that's dubbed? What am I doing here? And then like 20 minutes later, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're just all speaking English now."
It's a smooth transition.
Very smooth, but it was kind of funny. I had no idea what to expect.
I had forgotten that myself, when I was watching it yesterday, I had forgotten that the first 10-15 minutes is in Japanese and no subtitles. I myself stopped and checked, wait a minute, did I have subtitles turned on? Am I missing something here? Because listen, I watch so much subtitled anime that I can understand bits and pieces of what's being said, but the realization, okay, it's starting that way, and that's what we said more. It's part of the immersive aspect of it. You're pulled right in, and also I got to say, the opening moments. I believe this was the last time Mako was live on film. I think this was his last film because I think he died.
Which one was that?
Mako. He played Chio's father.
Okay.
Yeah, he voiced Iroh in Last Avatar.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, that's Mako. It was. Fantastic voice actor, fantastic actor for so many years, great Japanese character actor. His voice is iconic, and I think this was his last live action role. I'm pretty sure, as a cameo in the beginning. Yeah, because he died before they even did Last Airbender season 3. So, and it was around this time. So Mako was great, and just get that little shot of him there, and you realize. That's an old man, and he had young children. But that's kind of the thing of that era. A lot of mismatched marriages and ages, sometimes arranged, sometimes just happening like that. And and it's just fascinating that they show us this cultural thing, because you realize this is a movie about Japan. You ain't got no white people to the end. Ain't no whiteys till the end. And guess what? We enjoy every minute of it. Doesn't matter that it's not my culture. In fact, I'm fascinated by it, and that's part of the fascination of this movie that we're going to go through when we talk about this. The fact that the secret world of the geisha and this whole enclosed world. I forget what the city's name is because they only said it a couple of times and it didn't stick with me. But this is happening in World War II, or during the buildup and during, and you don't know it because it's a reflection on the time. The Japanese people had no idea what was going on outside the islands. None. The army and the imperial family kept them just ignorant what was going on. So they just were going about their lives. And I love it when we get to the third act, post-war, the shocking, jarring change in the atmosphere when you got GIs all over the place and people. There's this one scene, I'm gonna say it now just because we're talking about it. There's one moment when Chio, and we'll go back and forth calling it Chio or Sayuri, when she returns, because that's another important thing I want to talk about later. When she comes back to the town for the first time to see Mameha. I gotta say the names right. Mameha. Got me pronounce it
You're
right.
doing way better than I would have. I'm gonna be saying that chick from this place, or that dude.
You can say Michelle Yeoh. It's fine.
All right, I got Michelle Yeoh. I got one of the actress' name, and I got the chairman. The chairman's easy.
Yeah,
but besides that, I'm gonna be pretty rough.
Ken Watanabe. Love Ken Watanabe.
Oh, he is an incredible actor.
Yeah. But when she returns to the town for the first time, when the war's over, you get one brief shot and you see somebody buying something with American $1 bill. And that right there, that's just the shock of the change. Before, it's yen, and suddenly, boom, there's that one brief shot. Hey, this different world now. Now the dollar. When Pumpkin's going on and about, oh, you're gonna pay in American dollars? Nah, that's the changing world. But we'll get to that. That's Act 3.
I just want to say I liked Pumpkin a lot more in Act 3. She served a purpose beforehand, but afterwards she was fun.
I want to talk when we get to that, because I want to go through each act. Normally we'll jump around, but this is a story, and we have to go through it bit by bit.
Let's do it.
Because, all right, so the prologue, the pacing of the prologue, I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Watching everything with Chio and her sister to the breakdown. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I agree. The pacing is really good, and it's a lot of essential information. In other films where a prologue like this, if it lasted 45 minutes, I would probably be bored, a little bit annoyed at it, because how much of this do we really need to know? This is the child version of the main character. Do we need to see the child this much? But no, everything we got was very important, especially with her building up her rivalry between the crazy psycho woman.
Gong Li playing Hatsumomo.
Yeah, she was super crazy. Yeah. But that rivalry was probably one of the most important things built up in the prologue, and just building up her character. The arc that the main character goes through is beautiful. It's very subtle, but when you compare the beginning to the end, you can see it's something really cool.
Well, until she meets the chairman on the bridge, you have no idea that we're about to walk into a love story. You have no idea that's what this essentially is. A woman who has a young girl fell in love with a man who showed her kindness, and then strove to reach a point where she could enter his world, because she felt pure love for him and respect. And it's not just, I don't want to say it's just infatuation, because she gets to know him as the years go on. And it's not just, some critics will say, oh, there's grooming all over this. No, that was a man showing kindness to a girl who he saw injured.
That is one of the things that I have a slight issue with the movie. It's not an objective flaw. It's a cultural thing. So I'm not going to, this isn't going to affect my score, but it did make me question a little bit, because him showing her kindness at the beginning, not that word. But at the end, when it's revealed that he's the one who pushed her to be a geisha, who gave her that opportunity and built that up, that seems way more like that word.
Well, I mean, there is a very large age gap between Chio and the chairman. There's at least a 20-year age gap.
Before that reveal at the end, I would 100% have defended this film, said not even a hint of the caring of a dog's fur. But with that scene, with that revelation, that was his intention too, until his business partner took an interest in her, he had an attraction to her, which it made me uncomfortable at the end. But I
can understand.
I attribute that to more a cultural thing.
It is because
it's very well written and it makes sense. It makes a lot of things make sense at the end. But.
And at the very end, though, considering Chio is easily in her 30s, or at least 30 by the end of it, because she starts out at 9. She's 15, 16 by the end of in the second act. And that takes over a period of time. And she's in her late 20s, mid to late 20s, because I think the reconstruction period they're looking at, it's around 46, 47. I think so. She's in her mid to late 20s, and at that point, there's nothing wrong with that. At that point,
no,
because
not at that point.
Even though he's clearly in his 50s, she's in her 20s. But in that part, but I can see where you're getting from. But then again, like I said, it's a cultural thing because even today, age of consent in Japan is 16.
Well, and things were different in the olden days.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
Look at Shakespeare. Look at Romeo and Juliet. Juliet was 14, and that's considered one of the greatest love stories. So, like, I can't judge an old story. Which is it a true story?
It's it's based on a book. I think the book is based on real events. I'm pretty sure.
But regardless, I can't judge the past for that. And they didn't portray anything in an untoward fashion in the film, and it made sense from a writing perspective. It's just something I noticed, so I'm not going to take points off. It made sense, integrated well.
Then there's the whole point in the sense that, as the movie teaches you, geishas aren't whores. They're not whores. They're not
they
even.
They end up being whores a little bit, but not by design.
Yes, some can, but at the end, some of them are. So, I mean, some of them do, like Hatsumomo, she did, spread her legs willingly, but it's supposed to be
with the exception of when you're selling your virginity.
That's different. And that's a cultural thing. That was a cultural thing, and I'm not going to judge that.
No,
I'm not going to judge that at all, because there's not, if that's the way it was, and it's still consenting parties at that point. So, but the thing is, they make it very clear that the way the cultural stuff works and this and that, and how it was back then, and we're not here to judge it.
No.
And we're very, and you just, it works. And I'm feeling okay with it. But so back to the prologue, we get young Chio taken from her family, thrust into this world where it's just completely foreign to her. And that stark contrast of rural to even small town. It's not even a city. It's a town.
Oh, she can't imagine 20 houses next to each other at the beginning.
When she and Pumpkin are doing their chores and they're on the roof and she looks out across the townscape for the first time, it's mind-boggling to her. She has no idea, because, like, where's my sister? Oh, she could be anywhere out there. And also it reminds you that in Japan, because it's an island nation or a nation of islands, everything's compact. There's
Has
no
to be.
room. Has to be. There's no room to move around there. And I'm always fascinated at this point in the movie, through the first 2/3 of the movie, watching the Japanese citizenry going through the streets without a care in the world, how the geisha are given respect and a wide berth. Nobody accosts them. As opposed to then when you get in the third act and the GIs are there, it's chaos. Suddenly it's chaos.
And that's a great example. I mean, not an extreme example, but a great example of the film trusting its audience. And I love that. There's so much show, don't tell storytelling in this film. It's baffling that that's why I think it really stands out as more a classic film than a modern film, because it's allowing the audience to immerse themselves in this world and see it. You don't need to hear a description. You don't need to hear her mentioning, that guy that you're talking about paid with $1. And my favorite example of it is second act, but it ties into what you're saying, is when she first is being trained to sleep like a geisha, they pour the rice around her head. They don't describe what the rice is for. They don't give you an explanation, but the next morning when you find it all over her face, you figure it out.
And what you get is a Mameha's description of, you are a geisha. Your life is going to be pain. Your feet are going to hurt. Your back's going to hurt. Everything's going to hurt. And as we're getting that monologue, you see her, how she's supposed to train to sleep perfectly still and not turn over. And then you show that she effed up. And it's all stuck in her hair and stuff. And again, it's brilliant. One of my favorite early show don't tell moments is in the prologue, when she tries to escape after Hatsumomo tries to make her out to be a thief, and she then reveals it to Mother that Hatsumomo's a whore, basically. the mother shuts up the Okia. Nobody can get out. And she climbs out and she's scaling rooftops and she's doing the best she can. And then there's that one great cut where she slips and falls. And then they didn't need to show us her being found. They need to show us her damaged, hurting. No, we cut to she's back at the Okia. She's bandaged up and she's in trouble. And
we
now,
didn't need any of that. We can infer all that.
It's
already a long movie, so they were really good about prioritizing their screen time.
And it's a great cut, and you then suddenly realize that it's told to us in very clear exposition that you are no longer on track to be a geisha. You are now a slave. Or she says, I am now her slave. And and we watch her just trudging through life, doing this and that, until she meets the chairman on the bridge, where she's just despondent, and one single act of kindness gives her the hope she needs, is to go forward and a goal. And it's a pure goal because to enter this world, hoping that she could get in there. And I gotta say, I love the whole concept of water. There's too much water in you and this and that.
They're very clear with the metaphor there. With a lot of metaphors in the film. I'm a big fan of metaphors when used properly, and this film really likes to go through the ones that does it. Yeah, absolutely.
It's timing, it's dialogue, it's delivery, and it's just it pulls you in. And this whole prologue, watching Chio suffer and lose her opportunities, we connect with her instantly. I mean, talk about rooting for somebody to get what they want and not realizing how you're going to get there when you just miss 6 years of training. And then suddenly, here comes Mameha. What we learn later at the behest of the chairman to give her that chance. It's, how do I put this? It's compelling. It's something that's missing from a lot of heroines in today's modern movies. Chio, later renamed Sayuri, she earns every step of the way. We watch her training, the montage of training that Mameha puts her through. It's legitimate. It's not Ray Palpatine montage training. No, it's actual training with actual descriptions and showing her working. I mean, we see it,
and it's not like she has no backing to be a geisha. She's lived in a house full of geishas. She's been able to watch geishas for years. She's practiced in privacy because that's what she always wanted to do. Like, it's not just Rey like, oh, one day I found a droid and decided I'm a Jedi, and a week later she's besting Luke Skywalker in a fight. In universe, a week. Isn't it like a week from the beginning of Force Awakens to when she beats Luke in Last Jedi?
Yeah.
This is a much better way of doing it.
Yeah. And what we love is watching her stumble. I mean, she stumbles along the way many times, and even in the most crucial moment, which we'll get to. But we start off Act 2, and I love the transition where where you get the shot of young Chio just running off with the tournament, and it goes up and comes down, and it's winter. The snow is falling, and then Zhi Zhang is now Chio, and oh man, she was such a good casting for this. I mean, I'd only seen her in, of course, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Rush Hour, but man, at this point, I had no idea her English was that good because I'd only heard her speak Chinese before this. Yeah, so I was, and of course, beautiful woman.
Yeah. Well, now that we're talking about her, I have to let the chat into the little joke from before the show.
Oh, God.
So I briefly mentioned.
I'm gonna hide now.
So I said this to Adam before the stream started. It's like, hey, that young actress they got to play the young main character, she looks just like her older counterpart. They're perfect together. Are they related? And he says, no, they're not the same actress. No shit. See, I thought they filmed most of the prologue in the 90s, and then they just waited 10 years for her to grow up or something, then film the rest of it. But that's just me. Apparently, that's crazy talk.
Leave this poor old man alone.
The same actor.
Leave this poor old man alone. He's got brain damage. Leave him alone. He suffers. He spends too much time with Dermy. Give me a break.
That's fair.
No, but yeah, in all seriousness, that's good casting.
Mhm.
Casting. You get someone who you can see transforming into someone as an older version, and you feel it, and it works. And I really do. Man, those blue contacts, dude. Woo, woo,
They're
pulls you
vibrant.
in every time. Every time. It's so enjoyable though to watch good casting, and Ji Yi, she is fantastic. And what I love about this is because she is trained in martial arts, just like Michelle Yeoh, because they have that physical training, she pulls off the precision of the
Mhm.
geisha movements, whether it's her training or her debut dance that she does that makes her the talk of the town at the end of Act Two.
Mhm.
This is what we're missing today. Qualified actors and actresses, perfectly cast for roles who could do the job. They're not just cast for one reason or another. Now, one of my maybe my only single criticism of this is the fact that half the cast is Chinese playing Japanese. That's really my criticism. That's more criticism of Hollywood. But then again,
Well,
you did cast the best people for the job.
yes, absolutely the best people
Yeah,
for the job, and it's not like it's restricted to just Asian films that
yeah,
Hollywood has done this. I mean, how many times have they cast, I don't know, a English person as a German person?
exactly. Yeah,
Like
it's
in Europe,
yeah.
those differences can be as stark as the difference between Japan and Korea.
Mhm.
But if you can pull it off, if you're the right person for
Yeah,
the job
and
and look close enough,
that's
absolutely.
why it's not a harsh criticism, it's just the reality, but I
Hmm.
feel the need to mention it.
Yeah.
That our lead actress playing a Japanese geisha is in fact Chinese, and her supporting actress, her mentor, her One-san, means sister, is also Chinese. I just feel
Hmm.
the need, but we got Ken Watanabe carrying the Japanese strong, and I gotta read his name correctly because I always mispronounce it. We get the cameo from playing the Baron, Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, the great Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa. I love him in everything he's in. He can play really good guy or play a son of a bitch, and he plays the borderline as the Baron in this one. Is like, yeah, you skeezy man. Skeezy man. We'll get to that though. Well, you know what? I'll jump right to that. Let's jump right to
Yeah.
that because we talk about the fact that Chio earns it all the way through. She trains, she practices. At
Hmm.
one point when she's learning to play, I don't know what that instrument is called that they play. What is that instrument called?
The string
It's
instrument
like
that looks like a
the
really
lute,
big.
like
Yeah.
a Japanese. I'm sure the chat will correct me. I'll say Japanese lute at the moment because I don't know the definition. I'm not that good on my cultural artifacts. But at one point when she's learning playing, it's snowing outside and she's dipping her fingers in ice water to strengthen her finger. I mean, damn, dude, that's training.
Well, that's why I love the conversation she has with Nobu at the sumo wrestling deal,
Mhm.
where she's defending the
Life of a
legitimacy
geisha.
of
Yeah.
the life of a geisha, where he's like, sumos are just dancing, business deals are just dancing. Like
Mhm.
it's no easier to be a geisha, because that's the impression that they give off. The best geishas make it seem effortless.
Mhm.
And so the fact that he believes that means that she's doing a great job. And I love that. Where they don't explain that to the audience, but I
Well,
got it through show.
it's more setup and payoff because remember, early on before the training starts, Mama has says to Chio, "You have a way with words, a way to put things, and that's a
Hmm.
good thing." And it's just one of her skills that she constantly puts into play
Hmm.
throughout everything, whether it's baiting Hatsumomo or wooing Nobu, who is, as you said, so resistant. And I do love the sumo scene. I really do because it's showing her skill at that point, all she's learned, and then how they can. And it also shows how deadly Hatsumomo is because Hatsumomo is a great antagonist. And
Hmm.
oh look, a woman antagonist who gets no redemption. Hatsumomo is bad to the very end.
I wouldn't call it redemption, but I would say it's a degree of understanding with that monologue that the narrator gives once she leaves the film,
Mhm.
when she's walking
Yeah.
away in the street after the house burnt down. It's like, that could be me. That could have
Mhm.
been my future if the chairman hadn't reciprocated her love at the end.
Mhm.
she would have become the same woman in the end. So hey, yeah,
Bitter
she's
and
still
not so much so. I think she would have become bitter and cold, closed off. I think
yeah.
she wouldn't have been she wouldn't have been the
Vindictive.
ruthless tiger that they described Hatsumomo as, but she would have closed off her heart, and she would never have loved again. She never would have felt warmth again. It would have all truly been the painted facade of a geisha. Whereas that's why I think people were so attracted to when she becomes Sayuri, is because there was true passion. Her that water that she was told at first is too much, too strong. No, it was a powerful force, but also generated a warmth that allowed people to connect with her and feel that she truly believed in her chosen path as geisha. We go through the Act 2 goal training, and one of the best parts is when Mameha's setting up the bidding war, because now that's her whole plan, to have Sayuri earn enough money to free herself from debt and to be chosen as the adopted daughter of Mother, so she takes over the Okia, so that Hatsumomo doesn't make everybody's lives miserable and ruin everything for everybody. Now she sets up the whole plan. She wants to be Nobu, but we learn eventually that Nobu is too much of a man of principle. He will not buy it. He will not do it. And she unwittingly sets up the fact that the Baron ends up being the other bidder with Dr. Crab, who's kind of dirty old man, Dr. Crab, who's taking an eyeful when he's stitching her up. But that scene when she goes to the Cherry Blossom Festival.
Ooh. I think
there are two scenes in this movie that I have to go like this at. That scene and Pumpkin's betrayal. Those are the two scenes I wouldn't call it cringe. I guess I'm tense because those scenes make me uncomfortable, even though I know what's going to happen. I've been watching this movie for over a decade now. I know what's going to happen, but I still am uncomfortable because I don't want to see Chio suffer.
Which is a sign of great writing and a great performance.
Yeah.
That you can do that.
And also understanding, remembering that these are fragile women that are really only protected by the facade of geisha that most of society respects. But when left alone with a man who is hungry for her flesh, I'm trying to be nice here, who is hungry for her, when the Baron strips her topless like that, I just want to look, because you're watching this for the first time. I bet you thought he was gonna go all the way in that, didn't you?
I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't know that he really does stop at the waist down, stopping waist down. And but watching her fragility there and realizing that, I mean, you see it in the buildup, what it takes to put on the kimono, what it takes to doll them up, to put on makeup on. As he tears it apart, realizing how does she possibly put herself back together in that situation and avoid scandal. And then here's the perfect show, don't tell. They don't show you put herself back together. They show you her half broken on the ground because she effed up. She did not follow Mameha's advice. She did not watch herself. She should have stayed within reach of the chairman, who would have kept an eye on her, but she did. He was, and of course the chaperone was a fake chaperone. It was one of the Baron's men. He was not there to protect her. But when you watch her on the ground like that, crying, fear, it breaks your heart. It breaks my heart every time.
Oh, absolutely. You see how much struggle this woman goes through, and it's not her fault. It's kind of a weird deal where she's tried so hard to be a geisha, and every time she achieves a high level of a new level of geishahood, we'll say, it's contrasted by her realizing that it's all a lie. It's nowhere near what she believed it to be. And that's what every child growing up has to go through.
Oh, yeah.
Every child has romanticized views of, I mean, a common one in America is every little boy wants to be an astronaut. Then they grow up and realize that's hard as hell. Yeah. And so, like, it is her growing up in that scene and all the scenes.
She's 16 years old here. She's 16. She's overconfident at this point. She thinks, I can stop a man in his tracks. I have the physical precision. I'm able to fence words with people. I feel like I've got Hatsumomo on her heels. I'm okay. I can handle myself. And then realizing, wait a minute, I had one moment of not paying attention, and suddenly I'm alone in a room with a man that I shouldn't be with, shouldn't be alone with. And again, Hiroyuki Takagawa. I'm gonna say his name wrong again. I always say it wrong. It's such a long name. It's the three. It's the fact that it's three parts. It always get Carry Hiroyuki Takagawa. See, Samuel can get it right. He has it memorized. Every time I bring it up, I say, Samuel, what's his name? He says it for me every time. But he just portrayed. I mean, this is a dude who's played bad guys before, and he nails it for you. He has barely any screen time, but he's got that practice presence of son of a bitch character that you just feel it. It's like, I only want to look.
And it's contrasted by all the little scenes with Michelle Yao. Like at the end, when when the main character asks her, "You loved him, didn't you?" And that's why it was so hard for her when she found out that maybe something had happened with the Baron in her down in that the cherry blossom cellar or whatever that place was.
It was a dressing room of sorts because he had the kimono on display.
I don't know. It looked like a basement to me.
Hey, now it's not that kind of movie. He wasn't that much of a degenerate. He's just a man who's used to getting what he wants, and that's that's Mameha's. We learn later that's both Mameha's disappointment in her that she almost screwed everything up. And I love that moment when Mameha's chastising her, saying, "You ruined everything, and now how can you possibly hope to recover from this?" And she and Chio goes, "I am not worthless." Basically, you've almost destroyed everything, so I'm not worthless. And then, which is all those, I am not worthless. And I love the powerful moment that because no, I'm not. I have not ruined everything. I've retained my honor. Because you got to remember, honor is, almost the most important thing in Asia and especially Japan. Your honor, your face, it's important. How you're portrayed and what people perceive you as you. And for Mameha to think that she had lost her honor, I think it was a hurtful thing. And then to find out that Mameha had her perceptions wrong because the Baron was the one who wins the bidding war for her virginity. Clearly more than 15,000 yen, probably north of 20,000 is my guess. But because Mameha was in love with her Baron, she didn't let it happen.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I don't know who she would have been more comfortable with, Dr. Crab or the man who...
She wouldn't have been comfortable with either one.
I feel like Dr. Crab would be better after that kimono scene. Before the kimono scene, I think she would have gone with the Baron, but...
Yeah, but Dr. Crab, I mean, listen, Dr. Crab, he was being a leering, dirty old man, but there was nothing wrong with what he did. He was participating in the cultural format of it, and it looked like he was going to be gentle with her because that scene. Listen, I'm a guy. I have no idea what it's like to be a woman in that kind of moment.
Not anymore since your surgery.
That didn't happen. That day we.
Oh, not yet.
Happened. No. It's still there. But it's you can see that she's afraid, and show don't tell again. Dr. Krabs was like, "Come on, it's gonna be okay," and. Later on, when she returns, you could see the look on her face. There was no pleasure in that. And of course, then she has achieved Geisha in that moment, but at the same time loses everything. Because what had happened prior to this, when the bidding war had ended, you had the moment where they achieved the goal. Mother chooses her to be her heir for the Okia, and setting up the third act, the betrayal for Pumpkin, where it was Pumpkin's goal to do that. And Pumpkin, who had been sweet, good friend, this and that, but had been Hatsumomo's lackey, her puppet. Hatsumomo then flies into a tirade. She loses her room to Chio, who she has been afraid of, and that's why the prologue was so important. Everyone go. We had to. It had to build that animosity, that fear that Hatsumomo saw the minute she walked into their lives, realizing this is a threat to me. I mean,
well, even in subtle ways, she tried to get rid of her, like by telling her about her sister, giving her the opportunity to leave. She very clearly wanted this child gone.
Yeah.
And she never had to say it outright. And by the end, you figure it out and it's clear. But in the early scenes, they don't just say, oh, yeah, this little girl is going to be her rival. Like, just very subtle. And I think that's what the film does best, is subtlety and show don't tell.
Oh, yeah. And what you get with the whole Hatsumomo antagonism is, and that is, I mean, Gong Li, famous Chinese actress, beautiful woman. She gives you the different levels of subtlety. She's able to show you the arrogance and the anger, yet at the same time with a small facial expression, whether she's watching in the sumo wrestling or any other, I guess, tea room, her fear. Every time she looks at Sayuri when she's playing, when Chio is on Sayuri, it's fear. You could see it. And Gong Li just portrays it perfectly, delivers it. I mean, emoting. How important is every single character's emoting in this movie, Jed?
Oh, it's essential. Her rival, I'm never going to get her name correctly, but from what she ever actually says, none of it's really that bad till the end. Like, you could, if a different actor or actress was portraying the role, some of the things she said could have come across as nice, or she wouldn't have seemed all that intimidating because of her performance, because of her facial expressions. Even in the most benign of moments, you realize sadistic. Yeah, you feel it. The sadistic woman who is hiding beneath this facade. Because I think the reason that she's such a great counterpart to the main character and a contrast to her is because of the lifestyle of a geisha. They're all being so fake. They're all being so artificial because that's what they've trained to be. And they're both underneath the extremes that the geisha can hide.
Yeah. Hatsumomo is the facade of the geisha hiding a monster, but Sayuri is the pureness of a geisha that everybody does want to have a geisha be, because that really is her, because she wants to do it. She wants to be it so that she can achieve her goals. And it's not even because she wants to achieve wealth and fame and power. All she wants is the love. And that's the major thing. Both Hatsumomo and Sayuri, they wanted love. But Hatsumomo had it taken from her because she went about it in an illicit manner. Because the man she loved was just a lowly commoner, not a businessman or a military man. Because her favorite man was a general. We just called him the general. So she had the eye of a military man, as opposed to Mameha, who had the eye of nobility, because the Baron Japanese was he's obviously Japanese nobility or aristocracy. And Chio Sayuri, she catches the eye of the business section, the chairman, Nobu. It's a fascinating dichotomy of the different levels of Japanese society at that point. Military, business, and nobility, how they're all interacting in this one thing, and how they all are attracted to the different forms of the geisha, the different aspects of it, and how each one of them is different. Because I'll bring Mahima, God damn it, Mahima, Michelle Yeoh. Thank you, Mahima. Yeah, I had it right. I'm saying them so many fast, so repeatedly. I don't want to bobble it. Mahima, God, Michelle Yeoh is the perfect one in the middle. She is both of them. She is both the pure geisha, but also somebody who's using the facade to hide her pain and hide her loss. Because by the time we get to the third act, we understand all her loss because she's able to express it to us. But we're almost there. So
that's what makes her the perfect mentor as well, because as much as the main character is a great geisha, I don't think she could ever train another geisha, because how much she hated going through it, how kind-hearted she is. I don't know if she could put another girl through that, but Michelle Yeoh had enough of that monster in her to be able to push the main character to be what she needed to be.
Yeah.
And that's
the tough love.
The tough love. It's essential. And I don't think the main character was ever going to be capable of that.
No, because you got to realize, and at one point, Chio, she had complete trust in Mameha. At one point, she has no idea. She says at one point, the rule, there's a game being played here, and only Mameha knows the rules. And I have no idea what's going on. She had no idea that handing over the rice cake is saying, yes, you can buy the rights to my my happy place. It's she didn't understand that was going on until they got rejected by Dr. Crab, and they tried to do all kinds of things and this and that. And she tells her, "You're selling your virginity. That's how you're going to buy your freedom and buy security for yourself, by becoming the heir."
That would
And when
suck.
yeah, but we get the whole thing, the final battle between Hatsumomo and Chiyo. And here, I want to bring that in right before we get this part, because Hatsumomo's about to leave. And you got to understand, most of the time, Hatsumomo calls her Chiyo as an insult when she's been named Sayuri.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're supposed to understand
It's
that
dead naming her.
Japanese dead naming. Geisha dead naming. That's better. Geisha dead naming. But there's a significance to that, because when she has her naming ceremony with Mameha, "You are now Sayuri," and the world will know her as Sayuri. Only mother and auntie and everybody who lived in the Okia and Mameha and one other person know her as Chiyo. The only other person outside from all the women who are part of the geisha, the geisha world, only one person knows her as Chiyo, and that's the chairman. Everybody else knows her as Sayuri. And when when Hatsumomo says Chiyo, it's always an insult. When Mameha says it, it's
endearing.
It's endearing, and she calls her Sayuri more often than not, because that's her earned name. She's her graduate name. And when Pumpkin says it later, at first, prologue, Act 1, Act 2, it's because they grew up together and they were friends. But when she says it in Act 3, it's the insult, because she calls her Sayuri up until that moment. We'll get to that. We have to talk about it.
We definitely.
So then there's the fight. Hatsumomo's in a room. She finds the chairman's handkerchief, which she was right when she teased her. "I bet you keep it close to your heart." Yes, we saw all the time it always was close to her heart when she took it out of the box. They fight. There's the fire, and you see the ruthlessness of Hatsumomo.
Oh, if the fire hadn't broken out, she would have stabbed them all. She nearly did the matron or whatever.
Oh yeah, but at the same time, she then takes the oil lamps and continues smashing it, spreading it further, causing more chaos. She was evil because she had her heart broken.
Well, and I think that actually helped the main character in the end, that decision, because with the initial fire, it was her room. It could be construed as her fault that the place burned down. But as soon as everyone sees the psycho woman throwing oil lamps down, it's like, oh yeah, she probably started the whole thing, didn't she?
And I really love the way the movie does this very well with exiting characters. When they exit, it leaves you with the scene of them to understand how they exit. Hatsumomo walks off disheveled, because that's also the interesting thing. You watch as the movie goes on, Hatsumomo becomes, when they're in private, more and more disheveled in her appearance, showing her breakdown, her collapse of both her facade as a geisha, but also as a human being. She has nothing to grab onto anymore, and she walks off into the street, complete disheveled, to the line you mentioned. If I realized I could be her. Chiyo's narration of that, and she's gone. And you're basically probably left to understanding that with what immediately happens next, with the war coming to its pinnacle, with VJ Day coming along very soon, with VE Day, with the war in Europe ending, and now the clear war in Japan, the war in Asia is full swing, and all attention is there, because now suddenly people are being evacuated. Because
could we talk about a few things before we get to the third act?
Fine.
Just real quick, that scene we were just talking about where she departed, that scene, I love that moment when she leaves, because I immediately know this is the last time I'm going to see her. This is the last time I'm going to see that character, and that feels right. But I also want more. I want to know how she goes through the war. I want to know, does she try to rebuild her life as a geisha somewhere else, like everyone else did kind of after the war? Did she end up in poverty? Like, how did she come back from this? Did she die?
Because the only reason Mameha and Chiyo survive is because of the chairman and Nobu, because they are able to put them in safe places. Because at the moment, they knew the Allies were coming, or at this point it's just America, because the British weren't fighting in the Pacific, and that was it. It was the Americans versus the Japanese, because the Germans were done at that point, so were the Italians and the Soviets. Of course, Soviets didn't have either the capability to fight anymore either. So it was just America versus Japan. So the Americans were coming. They knew they were coming in force with bombs and this, that. Of course, they didn't know the bomb was on its way. And but you're right. The disheveled Hatsumomo walking off is a brilliant shot. I'll talk about the cinematography in my
okay, good, because I wanted to definitely talk.
I want to get through the story.
Okay,
before we talk cinematography and soundtrack and wardrobe and stuff like that, I want to get through the story and the characters first.
The immediate ending that I saw for her was Hiroshima. She's trying to build her life back up together, and she goes out, and she's close enough that she gets evaporated, full like Jesus arms. And that's immediately what I thought.
And that's what we're alluding to. She may have ended up in Hiroshima or Nagasaki in her wanderings, being forced around because no one made sure that she wasn't in a dangerous place. But I really like how that's it. Now maybe the book gives us a footnote of what happened to Hatsumomo, but then again, how would Sayuri Chiyo know what happened to it? This is 1930s, 1940s Japan at this point.
Well, she doesn't even know what happened to her sister.
Let
alone her own. They did it perfectly in the movie. I like how it still left me wanting more, even though I knew they made the right decision.
You're engaged with a villain. You loved hating her because you wanted to see Chiyo beat her, and she beats her, but she also lost her because Hatsumomo destroyed the Okia. It was a burned out husk.
Without that, they're not geishas anymore.
She got her last licks in before she left, but then she also had nothing and had to walk off into obscurity. Lost everything. Then, of course, Act 3. Suddenly, it goes from Chiyo watching Hatsumomo walk off, and then there's the jarring. Suddenly, here come the military, march through the streets. And we realize now, maybe for the first time, because people might have forgotten, we're in World War II. It's 1945. War's going on. And that is one of the most beautiful aspects that I think you have to be a little bit of a historian to understand the fact that it's a beautiful contrast that this secret world, this private world, this civilian world had no idea the war was on their doorstep. And all of a sudden, in Act 3, there it is. Soldiers evacuating the town in mass. And suddenly everything is different. The pacing, suddenly where there had been order and there had been beauty and contentment and just serenity, suddenly here's chaos. Here's chaos and fear. Fear. You feel the fear. And when the chairman's trying to get them out of there, you can see it in him because he's the one that he's known what's going on all along. Him and Nobu, they've known what's going on all along because they're businessmen. They're making, I would guess, munitions or something for the military. They have factories where Osaka. That's where their factory was, in Osaka. So they knew what was going on. And now, and that's what should be a man's first instinct in this situation? Protect the women you love, women you care, protect your family, this and that. I love it that, and this movie does great about showing male and female comparisons, roles, the gender roles and that. It does it in the way that's respectful and you understand because that's what it was back then. And there's no disrespect for a woman loving her man or man loving a woman or a man trying to protect a woman or later on a woman seizing opportunity. And we'll talk about in a second what's going on. They're trying to force a situation to do something that would be a little untoward, but it's desperation. So the war happens, and I love Chiyo's monologue to give us the passage of time, and I love the imagery when she gets sent off to the kimono maker as the kimonos are being when the dyeing process and they're being properly washed in the river, and she's talking about the destined destruction, and you see what you think might be blood at first in the water, but it's just red dye.
It's a great shot.
And she's talking about 1 year goes by, another year goes by. You realize you got to think probably about what happened was the evacuation was probably 44, is my guess. Because then she talks about a year goes by, another goes by, and we hear there are cities that were vaporized. Suddenly, okay, now we know we're in 45, and this is another year, 46, and realize the bombs have dropped, the war is over, and they lost. And she talks about shame and this and that. And it was a great shame because the Japanese people had no idea what was coming, and then you see it right there. They're a broken society. But they're a society with their pride still because Nobu returns. At first, of course, she thinks it's the chairman.
Then as soon as they didn't show his face, I knew.
Yeah, it's obvious. Yeah, it's obvious. And he arrives, and I do like Nobu's character. I like Nobu because I like him because of his principle and right there, he in that moment is the pride and honor of the Japanese man, the Japanese people, where we have just been beaten, but I want to be a man of means again. I want to be a man who can have respect for doing a job and providing something for somebody. And I like that. I like that aspect.
And he has the best chance to do of those three controlling classes you talked about earlier, because the military and the royalty, the ruling class, are in good standing right now, especially with the Americans, which are required to make him a man of means again. He's the only person or in the only group of people that has a position to do that.
In Chio's monologue, they make it clear that the I forget the name of the Japanese general in command of everything. He had just been convicted as a war criminal. And we historically know that MacArthur basically had the imperial family under his thumb while he was overseeing the Japanese Reconstruction, because there's the famous picture of MacArthur standing with the emperor. And so the nobility is done. It becomes a figurehead like many other royalties around the world at this point, and the military broke it. Literally, the American military broke up the Japanese military. It was decades before they're allowed to even have remotely any sort of military force or authority at all. And what's left, like you said, the remaining class, the business class, the working men, the what's the word I want? The manufacturers, the creators, the builders. There was left, and Nobu and the chairman were that. And I appreciate seeing that because it doesn't show the pettiness that today modern cinema would go, oh, look, this person of color is going to play the victim, no. Back then, these men acted like men in defeat and realized, okay, we're done, but this is the new world we're in now. We need to curry favor with the Americans because they got the money and they got the power, and we're going to rebuild ourselves. And that's historically what they did. They rebuilt themselves. And
a great example of that is a franchise that I know you love, the Godzilla films.
Yes.
They were built in the years and roughly the same period on a lot of the same sentiment of just building off of the most horrible things that happened to them.
So let's dive into the meat of the third act. Basically, Nobu and the chairman, working through Nobu, basically hire Sayuri to be the geisha that she once was, so that they can woo the general or the colonel, who is in charge of basically giving out the contracts for these businesses. And it's Sayuri's job to get the band back together. She finds Mameha, and now we get Mameha, who we learn she survived by selling everything she once owned, everything except for one kimono, selling everything. She just rents rooms now, but when given the chance to try and get back to it, she goes with Sayuri. She does it, and then on chance, she runs into Pumpkin, who's gone full slut.
The contrast is fun.
It's great. Yeah.
And another example of show don't tell. They don't even talk about it, I don't think. I don't even remember a reference to it during this sequence of reintroducing Pumpkin.
She's just there.
No, what I mean is she's trying to do an American accent. Her accent is so much thinner than it used to be. It's still clearly Japanese, but she's trying to talk like an American. Chickadee, she's having the mannerisms, like she's fully trying to integrate herself into American culture with the soldiers, talking the same way, sounding the same
bastards. She hates them, but she's she has using her training as a geisha to not quite
just
be
putting
geisha.
on a new face. She's still a geisha, just with a new face.
Of course.
And I love that subtlety. We don't need the main character to say, oh, you've got an American accent now. That is weird. Why would you do that? Oh, I am now being with them. I am geisha with them. We don't need that exposition.
And there's
Argyle.
It's a great moment when Sayuri is trying to apologize for the whole air situation where Mother chose her. While she's trying to apologize, Pumpkin just keeps talking about America this, West that, Frank Sinatra this. She's just throwing out all the cultural stuff. And then she goes, oh, don't worry about it. We're fine. But she's not fine. She's not fine. And let's jump to it. They eventually get everybody together. Now, Sayuri and Mameha are picture-perfect geisha. Pumpkin shows up to the party with a bottle of whiskey, ready to party, ready to have a good time, because that's what she is now, good time girl. And we're in it. We get to the whole thing, and now the bath scene, I'm like, okay, everybody's naked. Okay. Everybody's naked.
That surprised me, especially with, how prim and proper the geisha try to come across as.
But bathing is that's a different thing. Bathing's a very important thing in Japan sometimes.
Co-ed though?
So there are co-ed open baths. It is such a thing in modern times. I don't know back then, but co-ed open baths is a thing. I mean, usually it's separate, and it's usually an anime meme where the dudes try to peep on the girls in the bath. But there are open baths. I don't know how current it is, but what they get in there is you see the different levels. You see Nobu, who is furious that anybody, now his feelings are out there because he had that whole speech where he gives, I hate what you've turned me into. I was a man who could control himself, and I can't stand to see you being lusted after by other men. It to the point where he breaks a glass on his hand, and he wants nothing more than to have her be his, but in that old school respectful way where it's not necessarily a sexual relationship, but that geisha and patron relationship where he could dote on her and she will give him that satisfaction that isn't necessarily sexual, but appreciation. Because that was the whole thing that Mama had taught her. It's not about sex. It's about relief from a stressful life. Because many of these men she mentioned, a lot of these men are in arranged marriages. There's no love there. You're here to give them that brief release, that appreciation that they don't get in their private life. But now Nobu realizes he wants that, but he also probably wants more. You have the chairman, who you can see at this point. We understand that he's struggling. We know at this point he has feelings for you because, again, Ken Watanabe's emoting. He's delivering it without saying it. Never once
says it.
Till the very end there. Mameha, who is just trying to maintain herself, being back in the role, and Pumpkin, who's the wild card. And what we learn then is that Sayuri rejects the Colonel's advances. She rejects the Colonel's advances because she says, I'm not a whore. There's no price you can have, no price for me. But then realizing that the only way she can get rid of Nobu's advances, because she doesn't want that, because it's a different world. She knows that she doesn't have to accept it, is to make him think that she had an illicit affair with the Colonel. Now, of course, these are all grown and consenting adults, so there's choices are fine. And then she thinks she enlists Pumpkin to help her because she said have Nobu bring him. But then when Pumpkin brings the chairman in that scene, that's the other scene. I tense up because it's just Pumpkin's betrayal. Did you see that coming, Jed?
I didn't, because in that moment, my first instinct was that Pumpkin was trying to help her, because all we'd seen Pumpkin here is, hey, I've got a surprise for Nobu. He doesn't know I'm here. And it sounds maybe fun or coy or something like that. And so my first thought was, oh, Pumpkin thought this was a romantic rendezvous, and she knows that her friend has feelings for the chairman, so she decided to intervene and have this romantic moment with the man she actually liked. That was my initial thought until
then you realize Pumpkin knew exactly what's going on.
Face. Yeah, it was the moment I saw Pumpkin's face. I'm like, oh yeah, she 100% did that on purpose.
Yeah, and at that moment she says, "You took something from me. The one thing I ever wanted, and now I took the only thing you ever wanted from you, Chio." And then like her mentor, like her then big sister Hatsumomo, uses her name. She's been calling her Sayuri, then she calls her Chiyo, not young pumpkin Chiyo-chan, where it was with affection, with the chan suffix is affection. Now it was Chiyo, impersonal. Because you got to understand, in Japanese culture, they throw on kun, they throw on chan, all these suffixes that denote a certain level of affection or a certain level of intimacy. And using a name without it is either left for very personal interactions or insult. And when she says it like that, like Hatsumomo did, it's a little heartbreaking in that moment.
Well, my initial thought when that scene happened was, would Pumpkin have really been as spineless as everyone thought she would if she had been named the heir? Would she would have, because that is strength that she showed there, a negative strength, but she stood up for herself. So would she have been able to stand up to Hatsimoto or whatever her name is?
Yeah. I think that's a strength born of the tough times in the war.
Which could 100% be the case, but it makes me think
the logical path for me.
Yeah, she has it within her, though. She is capable
It was always there, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it was always there. So maybe something could have happened that made her decide to stand up. And I love that idea of maybe if enough abuse from Hatsimoto once she became the heir could have made her stand up to her old bully. And so it just makes me think, was that whole plan that they had to make the main character the heir necessary to fear the tiger? Or could the tiger have been vanquished by
her puppet?
Her puppet, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it like this, it was almost like this was almost Hatsumomo's last revenge too, because she learned, because you got to realize, Pumpkin was following Hatsumomo around everywhere. She knows what it looks like to be cruel. So she learned how to be cruel from Hatsumomo. She was because this is my sweet pumpkin. No, this was a cruel pumpkin who held on to this anger, this rage for years, and until Theo came back into her life, let it simmer, let it hidden. But then, from the moment she saw her, I got to think she was planning something. That she saw, not so much planning, but was ready to pounce on the opportunity to hurt Chiyo for that moment. When, if it had gone on like that, Chiyo would have been a good sister to her. She would have treated her nicely. She would have allowed her to remain in the Okia. She would have been a good mother, future mother. She would have treated her as the family win. But that, I think that cruelty of Hatsumomo passed on to her took too deep a root that perhaps this was always Pumpkin's fate to turn on Chiyo. And again, it breaks my heart. And for a moment, it breaks my heart to realize you don't know what the chairman is thinking when he leaves. And here we are, the final moments where Sayuri returns, and we realize now that she is a professional geisha again, because now she's an entertainer. It's not so much the original version of a geisha where you're there to provide support and comfort to these men trapped in their rigid lives, but now she is an entertainer. She will be a dancer. She'll be the center of attention at a tea party or ceremony, this and that, because that's how they're going to make their money going forward. And then she receives the news they got a job, and mother's so happy that they're this, and they've got another little girl there who's going to be an apprentice, I guess, who knows anymore. And then you get the final scene with the chairman. And I got misty-eyed because I love a good romance story ending. My little black nerd heart has some color in it. I feel emotion when I see these things. And I love the final moment. And let's go back to what you talked about earlier, where you said that the fact that he put her forward to Mameha, when he put her forward when she was already at the teenager stage. Not so much for himself. He says he did it to bring Nobu happiness.
Well, he said he didn't intervene when Nobu.
But that was the thing. I think when he learned that she was going to do it and that he went into Nobu, and when Nobu took an interest, then he wouldn't intervene because of their history in the Manchurian War, where Nobu sacrificed his body and got his scars to protect him. And so I don't think that there was anything ever illicit in this. It was always kind and gentle desires to give Chio a better life. And what I love in that moment is after they're opening themselves up to each other completely, where he says, "Look at me. Don't hide from me. Look at me. Just I've always been looking at you. You've always been my goal and all this." And he says her name Chio, and he says it with the respect and the passion and the love, not the hate that we had just heard it from Pumpkin or heard it from Hatsumomo. But it's a perfect ending to what turned out to be a love story. And am I getting too fig for this? to use the current terminology running around in the fellowship?
No, I can understand what you're saying. That wasn't the necessarily impression I got, but I can 100% see what you're saying, and it is a great interpretation of the film that makes it better. So I'm with you.
And you mentioned how you like it how they show don't tell you things. We don't get any confirmation of what their life was together after this moment. We just know that they were together. I mean, because we know from way back in the prologue when he first meets her, he says, "I would get my children this." So we know that at some point the chairman was married with children. We don't know his status throughout the movie after that. And now I have to assume that he's not married anymore. And he may have even lost his children in the war. We don't know.
Maybe, but my understanding of a geisha is it's not an alternate to a wife. He could.
Oh, it isn't. Well, at this
still
point,
be married.
Well, at this point, she's not a traditional geisha anymore, and that was her fight with Hatsumomo with Mahima that you mentioned, where she revealed. It was right when she makes her decision to try and trick Nobu, and then Pumpkin Betrayal. That scene before that, where they have that fight, and you mentioned where she says, "Didn't you love your Baron?" "No, I never printed myself. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. I know you." And she says, "We are geisha. We are not permitted that." And Chio says, "No, I'm not going to be trapped in this. I'm not going to be like you, the halfway point between what I want to be and what Hatsumomo was. And I'm not going to be Hatsumomo bitter. I want this." So she made the play to get the chairman, of course, then screwed up because of Pumpkin's betrayal. But then she gets everything she wants in the end. And I would like to assume, to me, it looks like that because it's not the traditional geisha culture anymore, that they probably got married. That's my guess. Because you don't kiss like that passionately and this is still Japan where because there's no more nobility anymore at this point. There's none of this. They're beginning to modernize at this point. So that means there would be nothing untoward about him marrying a geisha because the geisha is no longer what it was. It's a performer.
The war changed everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. The war changed everything. And there it is. I mean, any final thoughts on the story and the performances before we talk about the other aspects of the movie?
Not particularly. We covered it in great detail, so I'm excited to get to the cinematography.
All right, cinematography. You go first. You go first. How do you feel about the cinematography, which is just beautiful?
Well, there's so much talent in this film, from the writing to the performances, that the cinematography it had to be as good as it is just to meet that. And I think the two best moments were a combination of set dressing, performance, and everything to make my two favorite visuals. Is all the stuff at the cherry blossom field or whatever, all that looked just beautiful with the blossoms in the camera.
Oh, it's classic motif. Classic cherry tree motif. Classic one.
But I think my favorite point of cinematography is her dance, her solo performance.
Her performance, yes.
To become the top geisha in town. Just the way that the lighting was integrated, her dance, those shoes, my God. Those shoes were insane.
And that's why I mentioned earlier, that is the athletic precision of Zhiji Zhang. That because she is a martial artist, she has that physical presence. She pulls it off with perfection, and it's believable. And you're pulled
very
in.
believable.
And the stylization that they dress her up with, her hair everywhere and the snow falling. You're mesmerized, and you're supposed to be. I mean, that final position where she's bent over her back and she's arched like that, it's what that was supposed to be. Tantalizing, alluring, but forbidden. And it gets all across. My favorite shots are the scenery, the landscape shots.
Those are great.
crowd, some of the crowd shots, because I like the juxtaposition of the order and then the chaos, and the little things, like I mentioned earlier, of if you blink, you miss it. Now the dollar is the currency. They want the American dollar. Just one little shot, you hit it, you nail it. How everybody's attire changes. Suddenly, the world is dressing more westernized in Japan post-war. Mother's wearing pants almost. She's wearing slacks of a sort. Everybody's wearing rags and that. And then in the middle of it, they managed to put Chio back into her geisha garb, and she just stands out, this blossom in the middle of this whirling chaos. And everything about visually this movie is perfection. There's not a missed moment, not a missed sound. Even the sounds, and we're not talking the score, which we're going to talk about in a second. Every sound, every breath, everything is perfectly timed to keep you engrossed, engaged in the scene. The suspension of disbelief is complete in this film. It's never broken for me. Was it ever broken for you?
No, not for a single moment. I was in this world. I was with these characters, invested in them, and that's very rare. Very rare for me. As much as everyone knows, I like to be objective as possible. I see plot holes that other people don't care to see. This film, I
there's no plot holes.
Not
there's
that
no
I could really see.
There's no convenience. There's no contrivances. Everything plays out with a realism that makes sense. And we are now for this, really, this is my favorite moment to talk about, I think. The score. We talk about this kind of thing all the time. Who is the GOAT when it comes to movie scoring in modern time? And we always say John Williams, but this movie is why John Williams is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, of all time in modern cinema scoring. Because going into this, if you listen to the score of this movie, which is Japanese flavor, culture flavor, and you've got Yo-Yo Ma playing the cello parts, dude. Yeah, they have the best of the best, either writing or playing this music. You don't know it's John Williams because he completely absorbed every aspect of that era's music, that era's sound, that tone. And except for a couple of moments, there's a couple of moments where you hear that familiar John Williams twinge, that little footprint, that fingerprint that lets you know that you hear, oh, that's a Star Wars type tune. That's an Indiana Jones type note, that special note that it lets you know it's him. Otherwise, you don't hear it. And it's so perfect. You realize that he is a master at his craft.
Oh, this film definitely cements him as the greatest of all time when it comes to film scoring, because a lot of people can be very good at what they're good at, be very direct, very specific in a type of skill. But this proves that he has variety, and that's what the greatest masters, just like the geishas, have. You can't be stuck on one skill.
Good way to compare it, dude. Excellent way to compare it, because you think about it. This is a period piece in history. This is not science fiction. It's not fantasy. It's not an adventure movie. And that's generally what Williams' most famous scores are attached to: the science fiction, the adventure, the fantasy movies. No, it's not. That isn't this. And that proves he can adapt himself and produce true musical art. As opposed to just a few weeks ago when we covered Black Hole, John Barry, his score for the Black Hole was not that great. It didn't fit. He was trying to put James Bond music in a science fiction movie that just didn't work. But John Williams just paints a audible masterpiece. Every moment is scored to absolute perfection. The music does what we always say it needs to do. It elevates this movie. I still have the theme in my head right now. I won't try to hum it because I'm off key and I'll ruin it.
No, I think we've all forgotten it. We might need a refresher.
No. It's like we ain't singing Happy Birthday. We ain't doing that either. But when I brought it up, because I own this on Blu-ray, so I have this, that thing was playing on the Blu-ray menu. And you could leave that on and not get annoyed by it because it's lilting. It's beautiful. It's subtle. It captures you. And you can feel it. It generates the emotion of every character in every scene. John Williams really is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time when it comes to modern cinema scoring. And this is it. Because the joke is, it always comes down to John Williams versus John Williams. Just like next week, we're going to talk about John Williams again next week. But it always comes down to him. But this is why. When he can give you Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and it has to face off against this, and if you aren't even putting a label on who wrote this, and you don't know it's him, and this might capture you even more than the classic themes of Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all the other ones, what more can you say to a man that is a true genius and a true master at his art? Man, that's why that's why this movie is going to get the score that I'm going to give it in a moment. It is it so? Closing thoughts, Jed.
Closing thoughts. I was blown away by this film. I said at the beginning, I'd never seen it before. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. All I knew is it took place in World War II in Japan, and Adam said there was some meat to it, that he chose it specifically for that purpose. That's all I knew about it, and he wasn't exaggerating when he said this was a deep and rich film that I could sink my teeth into and enjoy on so many different levels. This is the type of film that I love, the ones that make you think, the ones that make you feel edified afterwards. Of course, everyone loves the turn your brain off type movies, the fun action ones, but these are the type of films that make me love the medium, make me want to be a filmmaker and a storyteller because of films like these. And I think this is going to be a film that we remember for a long time, despite it not making a whole lot of money at the box office.
It was nominated for awards, but it didn't win anything. But screw winning awards. This movie is a masterpiece.
Oh, absolutely. And as we've said many times, the awards don't really mean anything. They used to, but they definitely don't now.
Yeah.
And the best way to tell that, what the industry has to say isn't always relevant is the fact that this film has, I believe, a 36% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics and 83% from the audience. This film, more than anything else, exemplifies why the critics are nonsensical. And this film really deserves some of the highest praise that I've ever given a film.
I am right there with you. I think I've been singing its praises and the way I've talked about it this whole time. When I first saw this movie, we're talking, nearly 20 years ago, because I watched it essentially when it came out, or a little after it came out. And I was blown away by the cast, blown away by the performances. The dialogue, the acting is superb. As I said, the cinematography is mesmerizing. The John Williams score is magical, and the story itself, as you said, I wanted to give you a hearty meal with this one, and I am so pleased that you enjoyed it. I've been nervous, like, please let him like this one. Please let him like this one. I want to have a positive discussion, and I'm so happy because this is, as I said when we started the stream, this is art. This is cinema. This is something that should be celebrated and discussed and enjoyed, because, as you said, we want to turn our brains off, but there's also turning your brains off and then falling in love with something you're watching that you could watch routinely in a year. I mean, this is something I like to watch at least once a year, nice and comfortably, just sit back, enjoy it. And even those tense moments, I hate them, but like you said earlier, that's what draws you in. That's what draws you in, makes you appreciate every little bit of it. So, with that being said, it's my movie this week, so I scored first. 9.8 out of 10, man. That little thing about, even though you're casting the best you can, my only criticism is Chinese actors playing Japanese people, but that their quality overshines that. But 9.8 out of 10, because I find no faults in this movie. I find no faults to shave it down, and that music jacks it up from a 9.5 to a 9.8. All right, Jed, how do you feeling?
I am going to rate it very, very similar to you. I think the biggest problem with this film is it's not longer. A TV miniseries would have done better. That's, I think, is the biggest problem with this.
I want more!
I want so much more from this film. I want to see some of the intervening years of her being a slave girl in that house. I want to see what happens to some of the other characters. I want to see the happily ever after. And the biggest thing that I actually want to see is more of her time during the war at the kimono factory. I think that could have that's the one sequence that I think is left to exposition rather than showing to a further degree. Like that shot you're talking about of like the dyes, you think in their blood. Like I love that shot and her saying what she went through in the voiceover, but we don't really get to see how hard that time was for her. And it clearly changed her a lot. She is a very different person afterwards. And I think that is important information to see that transition from being top of the world, best geisha in town, the fire, obviously, and then this downcline to this poor peasant girl again. She's back to square one, back to where she was when the story started. And I definitely think that is not I think it's a flaw.
It's not a fault. You just want you want to see it.
I want to see it, and I think we needed to see it.
It might be in the book because remember,
it might be in the book, and that's the problem.
Adaptation.
It is restricted by runtime. I could think of a few things that we could trade out for it, so that would probably be the biggest thing because of how much she changes. We saw how much she changed in the prologue. We got to see all these big moments for her, except for those. And I think we needed a good 15 minutes just seeing what her life was like.
I'd be all on board for that. And how's that for criticism? I want more. That's not.
Yeah, that's a great criticism.
The great criticism. I want more. Oh no, give me more of something great.
So because of that, I'll give it a 9.5, which is one of the highest scores I've ever given.
I know.
It's a near perfect film.
Yeah,
really, the biggest problem is not enough runtime.
I was at a 9.5, but when we were talking about the score, it did what it always did. It elevated it for me because I hear it and I'm drawn in. So there you go, guys. Locked in Books, one of our more positive reviews. And again, Rebel and Jed's 9.5. He does not dole them out quite as easily as I do.
So, you might not see it again for a very, very long time.
Yeah, because for our next couple movies, we're going back to a little bit more of the not so artsy stuff, more of the pop culture-y things. Because Jed, what are we doing next week?
We are watching the original superhero film, the one that made it a genre in Hollywood, the original Richard Donner Superman.
Superman, the movie, 1978.
Which I haven't seen all the way through. I did watch about 45 minutes of it today by mistake.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, although I remember it pretty damn clearly because I grew up with it. It was on TV all the time. And I watched all those movies because that was what we had back then. Christopher Reeve, Superman. There was no Lois and Clark. There was no there was very little good animated stuff. And that was it. It was Christopher Reeve, Superman. That was it. So
I will just say from what I've seen of Superman, it makes me hate Man of Steel. Before I just disliked Man of Steel. Now I am going to hate it.
You hate it. And I'm sure we're going to have a discussion of how we feel sorry that Henry Cavill didn't get the movie we wanted him to have as Superman. So
100%.
All right, guys, there you go. Thanks for watching, chat. We love you. We know we don't really talk to you a lot during these, but this is kind of the thing where you guys sit back, we discuss it because it is more an interactive between Jed and I, and if we have a guest. And of course, you guys are always free to interject your opinions, but generally is that we appreciate on both our channels. Everybody hit that like button, share it out, subscribe to the channels, and we will see you guys next week. Take it easy. Have a good night or day wherever you may be.